Well, welcome to the shed. Got some progress done. As you can see, some walls and some partial walls. I ran out of boards. On Thursday, I got the call from the lumber yard to say that the roofing had arrived. I had to specially order 5 sheets of galvalume, 10 feet long. They were listed as being 36 inches wide. This allowed me to put 5 sheets of metal all the way across. It would bridge out to 15 feet in width. This would give me, with a 12-foot length on the shed, would give me about a foot and a half on either side, so 18 inches. Seemed about right, and it was, if I didn't want to have to cut the metal, which I don't fancy cutting sheet metal, I would have to have gone with 12 feet, and that wouldn't have given me any overhang on the side whatsoever. So pretty much it was 0 or 18 inches, and I chose 18 inches. Fair enough. So I got a call on Thursday to say that the metal had arrived, special order, and on Friday I went up to pick it up. But first, before I picked it up, I went up to Kiyomi's and I milled some, well, I ran some of the boards that I had purchased before over the sawmill. So if you remember before, I was splitting the boards, ripping them down the center. So I was creating 2 6-inch boards. They're actually 5 3/4. And I had a bunch of those still sitting there waiting to be shiplapped. So in order to put the profile on the edge to create that shiplapped profile, I needed to find a way to do that, and there was 3 methods that I came up with. The first method was to use the router, and I went and bought a special router bit, which was a rabbet bit that would do a 1/2 by 1/2 inch rabbet all along the side, and then you flip the board sideways, and you do it again, and you get that shiplapped profile to it. One of the things I wanted to mention was that as soon as I got the wood and I tried to cut it, I realized that the wood was going to be a lot more wet, a lot greener than I thought it would be. Essentially, it's come straight from the mill to the lumber yard and into my hands, and you could feel the moisture as you lifted the boards around and such. And I wasn't quite prepared for that, and I didn't really think about it, and I tried to throw it through the planer, and it made a great big mess. Gummed up the wheels in the planer so that things were sliding. I got black marks across the boards, and the dust collector got all clogged up with what looked like the insides of a squash. I had to take off the hose, and I had to clear it out with my hands, and it was a mess. It wouldn't take more than a couple seconds for it to get clogged again, so I quickly gave up the idea of trying to plane the boards. I think in hindsight, if I'd had the time, I would have ordered the wood a couple of months ago, and I would have stickered them, stacked them in a way that they could properly dry, and then I would have planed them and profiled them and used them. Most of the boards were full 4/4 right from the mill, rough sawn, so I definitely had room to do some planing if they had bowed or whatnot during drying. I could have resolved that with the planer. But I just didn't think of that, and I certainly didn't have time to wait, so I was stuck with green wood, and the idea of using that as is. The table saw seemed to work okay, didn't have a problem with green wood, but the router really made a mess of it, and the planer just basically gummed up the dust collector to the point where it couldn't be used. So method number 1 was the planer. Method number 1 was the router. The router just made a huge mess. It was difficult to control. I found myself really leaning into it, and then the wetness and sometimes the gumminess of the pine would cause the router base to stick or to grab, and I was fighting it all the way around, all the way down. Again, with dry wood, probably wouldn't have been a problem. I've seen guys on YouTube where they basically use a handheld router and just run it along the edge of the wood with one hand, and it works great. That was not my experience. It was extremely difficult. So method number one didn't really work out for me. Method number two involved creating a hand tool, and that was my last video with the hand plane, or the rebate plane. And that seemed to work okay, but man, it was a lot of work. It took a lot of effort, a lot of shoulder muscles to get every single board down to the proper thickness on the edge, and then flip it and do it all over again on the other edge. Each board seemed to take a really, really long time. If I had nothing better to do and no deadline for the shed, that would have been lovely. Probably would have been a really good workout. I would have spread it out over the whole summer. By the end of the summer, I would have had a stack of shiplap boards to build the shed with. But again, just didn't have time to do that. So method number one didn't really work. Method number two didn't really work. Method number three was the table saw. The table saw worked infinitely better than the other two methods. Basically, ran the board on its flat edge, on the flat side, and I ran a half-inch, I guess a half-inch groove all the way down a half-inch in, making sure that I took into account the saw kerf. So I would set my fence to half-inch minus an eighth, 3/8, and then basically run that on the flat all the way down against the fence, and that would put that groove in there about a half-inch in. And then I would flip it side to side, run it again, and that was great. I ran a whole bunch of boards like that. They all had the grooves on opposite sides, and then I set the saw up again. Actually, the only thing I changed, I kept the saw blade exactly where it was. I kept the fence exactly where it was because it was already in a perfect state. All I did is I added a feather board, which was something I hadn't used before, and man, it made all the difference in the world. As I took each board, flipped it end to end, and then ran it on its edge, and then flipped it over and ran it on its other edge, basically taking out the corners on the opposite sides, creating the shiplap profile that I was looking for. All in all, running each board across the table saw 4 times, doing flat edges first, flat faces first, and then resetting the saw and doing all the edges at the same time. Man, that was the best way. I got all of those boards shiplapped in no time flat. And again, the feather board really, really helped. As you're holding this 8-foot long board and you're trying to get it lined up with the blade and the fence, and you're really dealing with 3 dimensions, and to be able to solidify one of those dimensions so that the board wouldn't twist when you were trying to put it in. At least I could do the long way to make it go in straight, but if it were to twist in either way, that would again cause problem, and the shiplap wouldn't work out. So having that feather board come in there and hold that board tight against the fence as it went through the saw blade just made all the difference in the world. If I had it to do again, I think I might even put an auxiliary fence in there with a feather board on top, so that when I ran the boards on the flat, it just forced it down, making an even better situation. So all in all, I had a great day on Friday. I made all kinds of shiplap boards, loaded them on the trailer, hit the lumberyard on the way home, had the sheet metal stacked on top of the wood, strapped it all down, and when I got home, unloaded it all. Saturday began with me drilling holes in the roofing. So as the roofing was all stacked together, I basically laid it out, lined it all up perfectly, and then measured out every 16 inches and drilled holes at all the ridge points. Um, Pre-drilling the panels was a great tip I found somewhere. I can't remember where, but made everything really nice, lined everything up. I still had some problems on the panels, on the ridges where the panels overlapped each other, because there was a hole on one and a hole on the other, and when you overlap them, that hole didn't always line up. In fact, it rarely lined up. So I ended up having to drill a couple of holes up on the roof as I installed them. I think if I had to do it again, I wouldn't pre-drill the holes on the edges. I would only pre-drill the holes in the field, because that would just save some time. But the holes in the edges wouldn't line up anyway, so why bother pre-drilling them? Well, today is roofing day. I finally got my metal roof. We're about ready to put it up. I already got a couple of sheets up there, as you can maybe see from here. And I continue working on this. I'll give you a bit of a tour here. Anyways, the roofing went up lickety-split, no problems. Laid the first one down, made sure it was straight. I put a little edge on the back side of the roof so that when I put the sheets on, they wouldn't slide off the roof and they would all sort of line up. But even then, it's a little bit difficulty getting it straight. But in the end, it worked out pretty good. Put all the sheets up there, no problems, until the end. Well, here we go. Roof is on. However, just like me, something's gone wrong with the measurements. See, I was told that these were 36 inches wide, but in fact that's not entirely true. It's the distance between the ridges from one side to this side. That's 36 inches. That doesn't include this little bit on the edge, and on one side it's wider than the other. So as a result, my roof doesn't match. I've got this overhang here. Honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do about that. But other than that, roof looks pretty slick. But that was the roof. The roof's done now. We've had a couple of rainstorms since then. We had the remnants of Tropical Depression Gordon come through on Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday. It was kind of ugly and rainy, and the shed held up really, really well. So onto the walls. After I finished the roof pretty quickly on Saturday, I had a bunch of shiplap boards, so I started putting them up on the north wall. I had to shim a couple to kind of make them go straight. I think that when I cut the green wood, some tension was released in the boards and they tended to warp, so we had some of these beautiful straight 8-foot long shiplap boards, and then other ones looked like a smiley face, and other ones looked like a frowny face. So there was a couple of cases where I had to either squish down the ends, or I had to squish down the middle to line it up. Again, as best as I could, get close enough. There was another issue too. Because all the boards weren't full 1/4 inch, some of them, as you remember, I had tried to plane some of them, although I didn't get very many planed. There was a couple that were maybe 1/8 of an inch thinner than other boards. And then other boards, there was just this natural variance that seemed to occur across the entire stack of boards. Most of them were a full 4/4, but some of them were a little bit less. Now, when I shiplapped to the center of the board, so perfect 1/2 inch. when I actually put the boards on, if a full 4/4 board was overlapped over top of a board that was not full 4/4, there would be a bit of a gap. And as there's a couple of places on the wall where you can see sunlight coming through in the gap. It's a shed. It's not going to really hurt anything. So Sunday was spent setting up the south wall. And 4 rows on the east wall, and then I ran out of wood, and that's where I've gotten to at this stage. So all in all, pretty good. I actually was kind of happy I was able to do at least 4 rows on the back wall, because when the rain hit, and we had a fair bit of rain, it all came off the back edge of the shed roof, came straight down and hit the dirt and splattered up. And there's a splash pattern on the back wall that I'm going to have to wash off before we stain and seal the wood. But it just really helped keep all that muddy water out of the actual shed. The floor of the shed is bone dry and clean, so at least that really helped.
So these lead-in braces were a real treat, let me tell you. All future buildings will be built with lead-in braces done while the wall is flat, not after the wall has been stood up. As you can see here, I had to actually cut in and chisel out this portion in order to get the lead-in brace to fit in there. And then I had to do that on every stud all the way down. So I had to get it in there for every single one all the way down. You can see that there, down there, and then as we go down further beyond that, you can see down here where we've had to let that in. I had to chisel that out on every single stud, and let me tell you, right down to the bottom plate, not fun at all.
The front of the shed, I got a big tarp across the front door, and just to keep the wind and rain out, and it's worked okay. The front door is going to be a different issue altogether. I've had to reconsider my plans. This is the way of the shed. It's just this constant moving target. I originally planned it to be this perfect shed, to be exactly the way that I wanted it to be, And then over time, through experience and through various things that have happened, I've had to go and change my course and correct the course, as it were, change my plans. I had originally wanted to do a gigantic 10-foot bifold glass door across the front of the shed, and hence the great big large opening that is there right now to accommodate said 10-foot bifold glass door. I've had to reconsider this. The problem is that the doors won't have any room to swing in order to open fully. If I put a workbench in the center of the shed, as I'm planning to do, they won't have any room to swing in. If I make them swing out, the side doors then swing in which case there might be something in the way of those doors preventing them from swinging in, not the least of which being a counter that I want to run in a U shape all the way around the other three edges of the shed. Now that counter is going to be a shallow counter. It's not going to be a full 24-inch standard kitchen counter depth. It's going to be more like maybe 18 or 16 inches, 14 inches, something like that. I'm thinking maybe like 4 2x4s on the flat, laminated together and plain smoothed for a nice thick 1.5-inch counter all the way around. I think that would be really nice. So the doors wouldn't be able to fully open unless I notched out those counters along the edge. The doors would extend 30 inches in from the door frame. That's not the end of the world. I was kind of planning on doing that anyways, but then I remembered, oh no, I'm going to put a gigantic 5-6 foot workbench in the center here. Those doors actually won't be able to swing all the way in. They'll get caught by the bench as they swing in. So, what to do with this gigantic hole in my west wall right now? I don't know. I'm still hanging on to the idea that I might be able to do the gigantic glass wall, but it might not be movable. Or maybe it'll just be a large window that'll be the top half of the wall, like a 3.0 or even 4.0 window, and then it'll be a door, one door off the side, but I'll still make it glass.
Go around. I'll come over here and I'll be like,